Shari. Hello, thank you. This is second hello, thank you. I was going on and on about how I'm never going to tell anybody again about the game show winning. So thank you all so much for joining us. We are so happy to have this panel with us. I've already had my introduction. What I really want to say, just a quick opener, is that I sit on the Workforce and Talent Development Board, and we look at the workforce across the state. And some of the key things that we're looking at for the future of work is, for shared prosperity, we have to look at the whole employee. As Joth said, we don't know what business is going to look like going forward, particularly in the service industry that has had a huge loss of workers, many of them Black and brown workers. And what does it look like to rescale and reintegrate into our workforce, and what does it look like to support folks? And that includes having business look at things like daycare. Daycare, the cost of living, these things are going to be important as we look at the workforce. The workforce doesn't stand separate from societal issues. We know that now because we have children and pets and all kinds of people running through our Zooms for work. And so work is not separate from who we are as human beings. And shared prosperity means that we integrate that and we understand that. And so the Workforce Talent Development Board is looking at those issues. We're also looking at certificates and how we can help scale up adults so that they have the skills necessary now and in the future. So I am so happy to have our panel with us today. I know we don't have a ton of time with each of them, but I'm going to start with Andrew Cullis. Andrew Cullis is the president of Cullis Construction. He's a graduate of University of Oregon and now a member of the Board of Trustees there. He's a member of the Portland Business Alliance Board of Directors, and he serves on a 6-member task force to make recommendations on how our community can support more Black-owned entrepreneurs and businesses. So Andrew, this question is for you. You run one of the largest Black-owned businesses in our state. As you reflect on your experience, your family's experience, and think about these extraordinary times, the question really is, what can we do to support currently existing Black-owned businesses, and what can we do to support the growth of Black-owned businesses for Oregon's recovery?
Thank you for that question. I think the first part of the question is one of the most important aspects, and that's supporting the existing Black-owned businesses. We've seen Black-owned businesses across the United States go out of business during this pandemic at an alarmingly high rate. And that's something that's very concerning because typically these businesses have taken 10, 15, 20 years to build. And when you see those types of businesses that are so important to the fabric of our communities disappear, it's tragic. So I think people need to be very intentional about patronizing business. And one of the key elements to any successful business is reoccurring customers. So you can't just patronize once. You have to continue to patronize these businesses and be intentional about it. I'm in a unique business in the construction industry where anybody that hires us, they're hiring us, and it's a significant capital expenditure. So when we get opportunities, people have to be very intentional because it's typically impacting their bottom line. And as we've, as a company, and I think this is the case for several Black-owned businesses, you support a whole ecosystem of other Black-owned businesses. And then you also see promotion of personnel at a higher rate in Black-owned organizations than you do in majority-owned organizations. So what being a Black business does is it creates this whole ecosystem of management levels, of executive level positions, of ownership opportunities. And if you actually look to a lot of the large-scale businesses in my industry, I can point to the companies that some of those owners originally started out working. So what this can do is create opportunities for future businesses. We're very proud to have a very diverse workforce, and I'm always hopeful that one of our project executives, one of our leads that are from the BIPOC communities will eventually start their own companies, and I would support that and want to see that growth. So I think being intentional and really investing is critical.
And Andrew, when we had our little pre-talk, you mentioned this issue of the start, that what we don't think about is that Black Oregonians have been here for years, and as Rukaiyah had pointed out in our chat, adding value in the shipyards, in working in manufacturing and other areas, and yet they did not have the opportunity to have the fruits of that labor be invested in their businesses. And so you're starting later and then you're held to a different standard. You want to take just a couple minutes to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a business. Our company's been in business for 23 years. A lot of the peers that we compete against, they've been in business 50, 75, 100 years. And so there's a huge competitive advantage, and it starts with retained earnings. So when you have retained earnings over the course of 75 years, you feel much more comfortable going into a recession like this because you have the savings and the capital to withstand these types of recession. When you haven't had the opportunity to be in business as long, it makes a huge difference. So I think really focusing on that is critical. And then to your earlier point, the entire United States was built on Black people's back. And most of the craftspeople, men and women that built this country, they were pushed out of industries like mine once people started getting paid. And so it's really important for people to understand that, to know that, and then support those businesses that are trying to, as Josh said earlier, create good jobs. Construction industry is one of the few industries where you can either go to college or not go to college and still make a six-figure salary. And that's one of the reasons that I pride myself on being a part of this industry and supporting the growth of people of all colors and background.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Rukaiyah, we're going to go to you next because I believe Mark has little technical troubles there. So Rukaiyah, you were the person who brought up this concept of macroeconomics and how we look at things play out locally and how they matter on a statewide level, and also reminding us to understand that, again, Black Oregonians have been a part of this economic system since they arrived and have contributed to it. You want to expand on that a bit? And I'm sorry, I am remiss to give you Rukaiyah's introduction. Rukaiyah is the Chief Investment Officer at Meyer Memorial Trust, and she chaired Oregon's Investment Council. She grew up in Northeast Portland, and she earned her MBA and law degree from Stanford. And we were just so in this great conversation, I was just ready for you to chat.
No worries. One of the things I think we sometimes forget being remote in the Pacific Northwest is that macroeconomic forces really do influence our lives here. I mean, we are separate from the country in so many ways. We're integrated in other ways. And in this moment where we have Wall Street running at all-time highs, where equity owners and investors in capital are reaping and extracting lots of wealth from our economic system, at the same time that we have Main Street really struggling in the same way that Andrew is describing, where we have family, owned businesses that are struggling to get capital and maintain their payrolls, where we have that disconnect between the capital markets and Main Street, and then layering on top of that hundreds of thousands of people dying from a virus. We're getting some pretty stark messages from macroeconomics. And one of those messages that I don't think we've reckoned with enough is that our economy needs all of us to consume, but maybe doesn't need all of us to work. And that is a really important clue about how Oregon can win the recovery. And that we don't want parts of our state, populations in our state based on demography or race or geography, right, our rural communities, or the whole state to be a part of the economy that is not vital and that doesn't slingshot out of these bad economic times for Main Street. We want to be among the states that get out into recovery, that we win it, that we're not merely employing people in low-wage jobs that, in communities that will struggle. So that's one thing to note, is that there is this pretty serious disconnect at the macroeconomic level between Wall Street and Main Street. The other thing that I think we haven't quite reckoned with is what the Black Lives Matter movement means for business and what it means for strategic thinkers in business like those gathered on this call. And one thing I'd like to underscore is that we have in the past tried to make demographic cases for hope, and saying that the population is becoming more diverse, we're more brown, therefore we should be more represented. But what the young people are saying in the street and what business leaders I think have to really grapple with is that we need a structural case for hope. that means we need institutional change. And all of the institutions that business folks touch, our transportation systems, our utility systems, broadband access, education systems, we really have to think about how we can generate a structural case for hope that's in response to what we're hearing on the street. And the last thing I'll say that I hope we think deeply about is that this is a time of accelerated change. The pace of change is happening so fast, and the states that will be most successful will be the ones who can harness that rapid change and zoom out ahead of those that are not coordinated, that don't have vision, and don't have the resources that we do. So as we try to respond to this moment where we are recognizing structural racism and we're recognizing the consequence of that to us economically, I really want to call on all of us to think about the ways that we touch those systems that we really need to start to change in order to drive a structural case.
Thank you, Rukaiyah. And I think that is so important, right? Because as we look at structural racism, we know that structures currently in place have elements that are blocking people of color from fully accessing everything that is available to us in the United States. And so having specific solutions that address that are relevant and important. And also, as we look to win the future, we have to say to ourselves, what the future is now, and what is it that we need to do? What new industry do we need to start thinking about? Social distancing presents an opportunity for new industry. And how can we bring people aboard and what that may look like? And how do we work with young people? Mark Jackson has joined us. He's the executive director of REAP, Reaching Empowering All People. It's an organization he founded in 2001. Mark's passion is helping youth gain skills and connection to get them on that positive course. He's a graduate of Portland State University. Mark was the university's first alumni to receive the university's Diversity Award. And as I just said, Mark, you've devoted your life to helping young people, people of color, prosper and grow. What do you see as the greatest challenge in this work, and what is critical in this moment in Oregon's history as we look at how do we engage young people of color and young Black folks in particular to make sure they're part of shared prosperity?
Well, thank you for the question. And I think it's more so what are the opportunities in my line of work around youth voice, youth development. It's all about preparing the future now. You know, when we look in our classrooms and K-12 systems, you know, we see a very diverse Oregon, and that's the future of our state. And it's important that these students understand that they have value, they have worth. And I think the biggest challenge is creating systems that really affirm their value and what they can actually offer our state. These are students who are dealing with systemic challenges and barriers in the public school system, right? To where you have a lack of educators of color. You have a lack of curriculum that really addresses their narrative and their cultural history and heritage. And also you have a lack of really rich community partnerships that really kind of underscore the value of being Black, the value of being Latino, what have you. And when you have these systems in place that are really looking through a lens of white supremacy, if you will, these students often question, do I have place in Oregon, right? Do I have value in Oregon? Can I contribute to the future? So it's important to understand that if we're going to imagine or reimagine Oregon's future, we have to keep students as the North Star of our work, as the centerpiece of our work, to ensure that we're creating systems and processes and opportunities where they can thrive and not just survive. These students have to realize that when they transition from the educational system into the workforce, will they be re-traumatized, right, in the work culture? In terms of not having the processes in place to really affirm their contribution, you know, with Oregon's business sector, you know, how does our executive leadership look, right? How do our board members look, right, in terms of diversity? Students need to see themselves in those who are leading the state right now. And I think creating those intentional pipelines and supports are critical to ensuring that Oregon remains relevant, because the Oregon we knew is no more. Oregon is very diverse in its racial composition. It's very, very important that industry leaders understand the importance of really drilling deep down into the community of diversity, right, to really extract that local talent and to develop and to cultivate that. And that's the whole mission and work of REAP, is to ensure that our culturally diverse students have a mirror or a window into their future, and they see people look like them who share their narrative. And that's important. When these students come out of this pandemic, right? How they come out will set the trajectory in terms of how quick Oregon recovers. So it's important we understand the value of investing in our young people now to ensure we have longevity with our relevance in a global economy. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And one really important piece of all of this is that we know something already about what happens in economic downturns to people of color and also women. After the 2008 downturn, there was a significant loss in employment for people of color and women, one that they did not really gain back. And we're still in the process of gaining back so many years later as COVID hit. So if we're going to have shared prosperity, we have to make sure that we don't default to white supremacist narrative that only says there is a limited pie and I'm going to keep it for a certain people, right? We have to make sure that we know that from 2008 what happened. We cannot let that happen again, because that means that Black and brown folks and women will end up even farther back than they were. And so shared prosperity looks like including that. Rukaiyah, it looks like you want to tag on that.
Oh my gosh. I agree with you so much, and I might even frame it a little more aggressively in that we shouldn't be thinking about safety nets for our workers who really are generating the economic activity in the state. We should think about it more like a trampoline, right? We want to retrain people so that they're not just being caught in a net, but in fact being propelled into new opportunities in the future. And I can't help but reiterate why businesses like the Cullis business is so critical. Black businesses employ Black people. They generate tons of economic activity. And so if we are serious about an inclusive, shared prosperity, Black ownership and Black entrepreneurship, and investing in young people who will be the drivers of our economy 50 years out, that's where we have to focus. There's no other way to put it. And people like me who allocate capital have to get serious about making sure we drive those outcomes. We cannot hide behind our banking institutions or our funds or any of that stuff. It's now time for us to step up and support Mark, and Andrew and their businesses in order to drive a more prosperous future for all of us.
And I think, Andrew, I'll give you the last word. I'll give you the last word. I was just going to say that business case is what you make.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you mentioned was the piece of the pie, right? And so I was always lucky having a father, a Black man that was an entrepreneur. So I think Mark was talking about it earlier. If you can't see it, you can't be it, right? So I was always fortunate to be able to see that. And when we talk about growing up, my father always rejected the narrative that we were a minority business, because he said it makes you believe that you're only supposed to have a minority piece of the pie, rather than as a business being able to look at the entire pie. And when you're in business, you don't want to limit yourselves and your opportunities to a small section. You want to be able to look at all the opportunities that exist within whatever industry that you are. So I think by allowing us, like Rukaiyah said, to be able to think broader and not allowing people to make excuses for the lack of opportunity. And really that's all it is. People just want opportunity. I think Mark hit it perfectly, where these youth, they want to be able to see real opportunity and have the ability to be a part of this entire economy, part of this entire ecosystem. And when that happens, it's not only good for Black people or brown people, it's good for all people, because it makes for a better society as a whole. And when we start understanding that, we will have a better city, we will have a better state, and this will become a better region.
Thank you. That's a great final word. I know we have maybe we have like a minute and a half left. And I think the key here is that shared prosperity to include Black Oregonians has to be thoughtful. It cannot be an afterthought. It has to be a part of any planning moving forward. It is justified because Black Oregonians have been here contributing and yet have not been able to always reap the benefits. And so it's not a special favor. It is actually part of what is necessary to have a just economic society and a just economic culture here in Oregon. And so, that is why we brought you three together, Rukaiyah, Andrew, and Mark. And we appreciate you so much. This was clearly not enough time for so many wonderful thoughts and voices, but I think the three of you brought a lot to this discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and toss it back to Jeff. I think I'm right on time.